Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the best podcasts that have had an impact on my life and on my business. If you're new to the channel, I'm a business owner that's started and built several seven-figure businesses, but I really owe so much of my success to creators like the people I'm going to talk about on this video who have created amazing podcasts and had incredible guests on those podcasts to share amazing nuggets. I can't tell you how many times every single week I hear something from a podcast, make a note of it, or go and implement it right away and start seeing change in my life, business, health, whatever it is that I'm trying to improve. If you've seen any of my past videos, you know that a daily routine of mine is going for a walk every night with my dog for about an hour, during which time I'm almost always listening to a podcast of some kind or an audiobook. This is for a couple of reasons. One, it's a great way to collapse time and listen to a lot more podcasts than I'd be able to otherwise, especially since being an entrepreneur, I work from home a lot of the time and I don't have a commute. But listening to the podcast at the end of the day, I'm sure has some subconscious benefits where I'm processing those things while I sleep, as it's one of the last things that I put into my mind before bed. So let's go ahead and talk about the 5 top podcasts that have impacted my life. But before we do, this would be a great time to make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. If you're new here, I regularly publish about ways to improve your health, wealth, or personal development. So if you're into topics like that, make sure to drop a subscribe to the channel and let me know who you are and where you're from in the comments down below. All right, so the top 5 podcasts. Let's start it off with number 1, the Rich Roll podcast. So this is a podcast that I only got into over the past 12 to 18 months, but it's been absolutely game-changing for my health and for my mindset. Rich Roll is an incredible author, thought leader, and at one point he was actually one of the fittest men in the world. He's a champion triathlete, a legendary swimmer, and an author of an amazing book called Finding Ultra. If you're at all familiar with the endurance community, you may have heard of Rich Roll. I'd highly recommend checking out his book, Finding Ultra. It's one of the better books that I've ever read. I have a lot in common with Rich personally, as we both found our love for fitness through swim team, though Rich became far more successful at it than I ever would. His podcast is focused on interviewing some of the most impressive endurance athletes, game-changing health gurus, and overall great human beings. It perfectly balances guests of all different walks of life, sharing equal opinions from all different sides of the globe. What they all have in common, though, is a heavy influence on just becoming a better person, a better version of yourself, whether that's fitness, whether that's health, whether that's mindset, spirituality. They're always incredible guests. For me, this podcast gives an absolute treasure trove of health hacks, and it's become a massive motivator for me, improving my health beyond just being aesthetically healthy, having big muscles and being ripped, to focusing on longevity, mental health, a little bit of spirituality, and just overall balance when it comes to my health and wellness. I really appreciate Rich and all the amazing work that he does, and I highly recommend checking out the Rich Roll podcast. The next podcast for me that's been amazingly influential these past couple months is the Nick Bare podcast. Nick Bare has completely exploded in popularity lately. If you go to any gym in America, you're probably going to see a BPN t-shirt somewhere. There's tons of people quoting him, learning from him, and sharing his content online these days. And it's been really crazy just to watch him just blow up, and rightfully so. Nick is a US Army veteran, following which he shares a ton of stories about continuing his love for fitness, finding that in endurance sports, and later really popularizing what is called a hybrid athlete mentality. Around a decade ago, he started a supplement company, I believe, called BPN. Don't quote me on the exact timeline, but again, just like Nick, his supplement company has absolutely blown up in popularity, and again, rightfully so. It really focuses on amazing ingredients, right dosage, and together with the amazing content that Nick puts out there for free, it's really easy to see why BPN's become such a great name in the industry. Nick has really pioneered what is called the hybrid athlete movement, which really bridges the gap between traditional strength training like bodybuilding, think Arnold Schwarzenegger, and endurance training, think Tour de France. Something I didn't realize is that I was actually a bit of a hybrid athlete myself after decades of doing traditional strength training at the local global gym, mixed with a ton of running and later running an ultra marathon later in life. Nick's podcast has been amazingly beneficial for me personally because it really picks up where the Rich Roll podcast leaves off and really focuses a lot more on the business side of things. So it does a nice job of bridging that gap between fitness as well as business. It's incredibly motivating from a fitness perspective because Nick is constantly preparing and prepping for some sort of physical feat, whether that's a bodybuilding competition, an ultra marathon. I highly recommend checking out his Leadville 100 series, where he actually has an amazing documentary on running the Leadville 100. But there are really few places that I've found that you can find so much information for completely free, constantly vlogging and documenting his day and just sharing so much information that he has. I highly recommend the Nick Bare podcast, and make sure to hit him and Rich with a follow on Instagram. The third podcast that has had massive impact on me me is Mindset Mentor, hosted by Rob Dial. Shifting gears a little bit here, this is really a different style of podcast than the past two, where they really host guests. Sometimes they do one-on-one monologue style podcasts, but really Mindset Mentor by Rob Dial really focuses almost entirely on one-to-one monologue style content. I absolutely love this style of content because you really know what you're getting. Every time that I pull up Mindset Mentor, I know that it's just going to put me in a great place mentally. There's going to be some amazing nuggets to pull me out of maybe a rut that I'm in, or to just get me centered on being a more productive and better manager in my business, even if I might not be in the greatest of moods myself. I find myself just completely locked in every time that I put on a Mindset Mentor podcast, and I find that I really share them a lot more than I share other podcasts just because they're so actionable. There's always great nuggets in there, and he does a good job of distilling all sorts of different thought leaders into one cohesive piece where he shares that with you so that you can implement it, learn from it, and take it with you in your day. I haven't listened to the Mindset Mentor a single time and felt that my mindset was not improved in some way. So if you're maybe a budding entrepreneur, or even if you're somebody who's working a desk job just trying to be better at it, I highly recommend Mindset Mentor. It's going to help you a lot. The fourth podcast that has, without question, absolutely changed my life is the Gary Vee audio experience with Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't want to undersell it here. Gary Vee completely changed my life. I really consider myself around the throngs of entrepreneurs that were really starting their business around the time that Gary Vee was first coming on the scene. And it was really just right place, right time for me. Gary Vee was exactly what I needed at that time. Even though he was really preaching the hustle culture, that's exactly what I needed for those first 12 months of starting a business when it was really sink or swim. I can't tell you how many times I listened to Gary Vee in the first 12 to 18 months in business when I felt like I was in a mental rut, I was struggling with motivation, and I just put on Gary Vee, tapped into his energy, and got done whatever I needed to get done, and I'm so thankful for it. I remember so many times I got home from my 9-to-5 job, I was super tired, I was just beat from the day, and what I would do is I would just put my AirPods in, go out, cook some dinner, and by the time I was done eating, my mood was completely changed, and I was ready to just kill it for another 90 minutes to 2 hours, however long it took to get done what I needed to get done. I would 100% say thank you to Gary, because with his words, with his motivation, I was able to quit my job 6 months after starting my business and never look back to the 9-to-5 life. These days, he shares all sorts of content. He's got amazing keynotes that he's giving all the time. He's giving that away for free on his podcast. And there's just so many nuggets. I mean, he's just a predictor of the biggest trends in social media, in growth, and branding. He was talking about TikTok years before anybody else caught on. And if you're really just trying to key in on what's happening in pop culture and where the world of social and business is going, highly recommend Gary Vee audio experience. I got to meet him a couple of years ago when the Super Bowl was in Minneapolis, and I just remember looking him in the eye and saying, thank you so much for everything you put out there. You completely changed my life. I'm sure he hears that all the time, but it was just great to shake his hand and say thank you for everything he gave me. So podcast number 5, and without further ado, is Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. So I actually heard about this from a student of our SMMA Blueprint course who shared it in our private community. I'll link that down below if you're interested in starting, growing, or scaling your own online business. A social media marketing agency is the 7-figure business that I started with my business partner, Derek. So check that out down below if you're into that type of thing. So Diary of a CEO to me is to business what Nick Bare and Rich Roll are to health and wellness. He brings on the most incredible guests in the business world. Everyone from, actually, believe it or not, Rich Roll was on there a couple of weeks ago, to Richard Branson, to anybody else that you could possibly imagine. It's really remarkable the guests that he's been able to have on the podcast lately. What I really like about Stephen's style of interviewing is it doesn't read like your typical MSNBC article just praising the business wins that they've had. He does an amazing job of actually getting to know the business person behind the business, sharing their story, digging into the emotions that they had at all those different stages of their business and the success that they had throughout their life, and just really telling that untold story of the business person behind the business and behind the success. The title Diary of a CEO is so fitting because you feel like you're almost in the room with them, listening to them tell their story, and Stephen just does such an amazing job of being so respectful and humble as he pulls things out of these guests that you just don't get to hear anywhere else. As a business owner who at times has doubted themselves, felt discouraged, felt like I didn't have the energy some days, it's amazing to hear some of the most impressive business people in the world share their challenges, share their struggle, and you just don't get to be a fly on the wall in those types of situations very often. So I'm very, very grateful for Stephen Bartlett and the amazing podcast that he puts out there. I think they're actually the biggest podcast in the United Kingdom now, which is just absolutely amazing and so well deserved. What are your favorite podcasts? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm always looking for something new to listen to, and I'm sure other members of the community would love to hear as well. If you're curious, check out this video next on 5 life-changing books that completely changed my life that I could not recommend highly enough. I think that would be a great video to watch after this one. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.